Hello and welcome back to the AFL High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to have Balin Cupples as our guest. We'll be discussing everything you need to know when it comes to maximising your pre-season around smarter assessments as well as better performance. Welcome, Balin. Thanks for jumping on, mate. Really looking forward to our chat.
Thanks, Jack. Looking forward to it.
No doubt the listeners will be well aware of your background, mate. You've been on a couple of podcast episodes in the past and obviously well regarded in the industry. But for those tuning in that um, might not be aware of your journey, mate, do I guess provide a bit of a background where it all started, your passion for high performance, and then your different work experiences you've had along the way.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. Very brief playing career where I pushed out 4 NRL games and then along with playing was studying at the time and finished a teaching degree just as footy was finishing up. Wasn't really happy with the career I had and was a little bit bitter at uh, the career outcomes. I had a couple of years away from sport and more specifically rugby league and taught PDHPE high school for a couple of years and then started doing a master's in sports coaching through the uni as SID. And then through that, obviously spiked my interest again in getting back involved in performance and coaching. I've sort of been involved in both coaching and performance along my career where starting that masters and then getting back into junior reps levels, which is sort of 15s, 14s, doing 2 or 3 years of volunteer work and afternoons and development tours and then taking opportunities from there along with study opportunities. I had sort of opportunities come up that take me into that full time space where I had 3 years in a dual role where I was sort of head of pathways and performance pathways at the West Tigers, which was a really cool role where I'd sort of oversee the S&C development for the under-20s NYC competition at that time, along with being a defensive coach with the team. And then I also managed the performance pathways for both West and Balmain for 3 years. So that was a really cool experiences with some coaches that have progressed right to the elite level. And then from there, as with any career, shifted and got an opportunity to interview for a head of performance role over here in New Zealand. And yeah, interviewed well and got the opportunity to come across in 2015. And I'm in my 10th year now, managing performance department. So 10 years across the Warriors times two and the Knights. So yeah, as much as it's been a expedited sort of rise through sort of S&C pathways, I feel like those developmental experiences in the sort of athlete development parts of the game really held me in good stead to take that senior position.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's obviously in those two world-class environments with two different stints as well, so there would have been different departments. I imagine there's a fair amount of turnover in pro sport. Who have been your biggest influences to date that have helped shape your philosophy, mentors, if you
Yeah,
like?
it's a unique one. I'm probably less so. I didn't have like a strong S&C or performance-based mentor early in my career. Um, More so PhD supervisors, both sort of in coach education, well versed across a range of sports, who both were really good in terms of guidance. And then primarily the head coaches I've worked with. At the NRL level, I've been sort of rightly or wrongly worked with 7 or 8 head coaches. Um, and then along with head coaches, you got 2 or 3 assistants each year that you build connections with. And they've all been like strong influences on my career and my philosophy. And you're always evolving year to year. More specifically, probably um, not to sort of put him as a priority, but Andrew Webster, who's the current head coach of the Warriors, I've spent a lot of time with in sort of my 13 years full time within rugby league. And we've sort of both grown in our careers. So he's been really important for me. And then away from coaches, I've had the opportunity to employ and work with a range of like high class S&Cs and physios across my time. And I find that anyone you work with uh, leaves a little indent on you, whether it's some things you learn from them or some things you learn not to do. I just think the people you work with along the way and the experiences, everyone sort of continues to shape and evolve sort of who you are as a practitioner. And then lastly, lastly, from an S&C point of view, I've had the opportunity to work with some real senior coaches. So there was a probably tipping point right at the end of the rugby league career with I did my level 1 ASCA with David Boyle, who's a highly respected S&C coach and has been in the game for an extended period of time, who I've had plenty of chats with along the way. I've got a lot of time for. And then really experienced practitioners in Alex Corver, who I had some time with. And he's achieved a lot within rugby league. And then I was lucky enough to spend a couple of years working closely with Dean Benton. And he's obviously second to none in terms of his experience and his knowledge around key factors at S&C. So they're sort of senior guys that I've spent time with over my career and taken plenty from. And then outside of footy, obviously your family, your wife, your kids, they definitely influence your career and support you and shape how you see things in footy and in life.
Well said, mate. And some world-class practitioners there, both from coaching tactical side of things as well as the S&C. Yeah. Were you pretty clear early on that it was going to be the strength and conditioning side of things that you'll go down, or were you potentially looking down the tactical side?
Yeah, a few sort of sliding door moments. I always had a passion I had really good relationships with my S&Cs as a player, and then did both coaching on the football side and S&C in that junior rep level, and then that Tigers NYC position come up. And yeah, I sort of fell into that S&C role and put my head down and read lots of things and did short courses and made sure that, I was competent in that physical preparation space. And I just grew from there, and the passion sort of continues to grow. So, it's always sort of in the background. And I just think that a little bit of experience on the coaching side or knowing the game has probably kept me in the sport for as long as I've been in as well.
Yep. And obviously, no doubt, looking to maximise every day and driving the program, being in high performance manager role for quite some time now. I imagine pushing the boundaries is something you're big on, which comes with that pressure and challenges. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced over your career to date, and how did you sort of learn, or how did you grow as a practitioner from facing those challenges?
Stepping up to that head of performance role relatively early in my career definitely learned some lessons. I was probably more data driven than data informed when I first got that head of performance role, and I'm a half glass empty type of guy. So in those first couple of years, whenever we played a game, for me to enjoy it and go away happy, there was like ridiculous things I was looking at. I was going, we've got to win, we've got to have no injuries, we've got to finish that last quarter strong, we've got to win high ball and play periods, and our benchies have got to have impact. So I was just throwing up all these different things that, now, if I'm doing my job, these things should happen. Where half of those things or most of those things are really, as much as you impact them, they're out of your control. So in those first couple of years, I was definitely probably not enjoying it as much as I should have for the role and the people I was working with. So I think that's just keeping it in perspective. The highs and lows of footy and being in season, from injuries to losses to wins, you just sort of got to stay stable and relative. And then, more so around like just balancing, probably a key challenge, finishing a PhD and working full time in high performance was a personal challenge for me. And it was definitely a struggle and an enduring effort, but really stoked I got through it, and to look back on it now and to see what's been achieved is pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be good to unpack those two challenges, because I reckon they probably resonate with a fair amount of listeners, especially certainly working in the industry. I guess that high performance manager role, you're certainly not the first one to acknowledge that at the start it can be quite driven, informed, and or driven, data driven. Sorry, but then also putting on a lot of pressure on yourself to get those results side of things, and looking at the how you finish games, the fitness side of things, no injuries, availability, and the rest of it. What changed? Was it something that family and friends sort of said to you? Was it more just a personal gut feeling? You started to realize, like, this is something that, that I chose to work in and that I should be loving, and it's starting to feel a bit hard? Or talk us through the process where you started to make a shift, I guess.
I think it comes with experience and seeing things, and that coach's eye in certain situations, and as I said, putting things in perspective. And on the flip side, it comes with like trusting the staff around you as well, where you're not micromanaging everything for the first couple of years in that leadership role, and you build trust and relationships within your staff, both S&Cs, physios, football coaches. And as you build that trust, then you're able to let go a little bit. And then obviously with a little bit on the family side, when kids come along, you realise that, yeah, your work life and footy's super important, and you never lose your passion for it. But there's other things in life as well that can make you happy and keep you happy.
Yeah, yeah. And last question on the career side of things, I guess, for the strength and conditioning coaches looking to crack into their first full-time opportunity. You mentioned the years that you did along the way, obviously as a player, and then the academic side of things, and then building your way up to the head role. What advice would you give to someone starting out looking to land their first full-time contract?
Obviously taking opportunities to coach. So I was lucky enough where I was teaching, so I had afternoons free. Had sort of no kids with my wife at that stage, and using previous contexts within the game, still obviously did everything like for free, or went along and volunteered all my time, and it was 2 or 3 afternoons a week, and I volunteered for development tours and weeks away. And the more that you can, and even across sports, I was probably lucky enough and still am where, as much as I'm happy with the length of time within rugby league, and I really enjoy it. My pathway within rugby league sort of hasn't stopped, and I haven't sort of experienced a lot of other sports. In saying that, at that developmental level, if you can spread your wings a little bit and see other sports, meet other coaches, build connections, they're always going to come back to sort of help you. And I think that's probably an undersold point within S&C in general. Like, you never know some of those development level positions and the people you work with, the connections you have, more so on the coaching side, that coaches progress as well. And if you've made a positive impression on those coaches, then you might get a phone call or an opportunity might come up again in the future. So the more people that you can get out and talk to and build those relationships with, while still obviously balancing your time and living your life, I think that'd be some key points for those developmental S&Cs moving forward.
100%. Couldn't agree more. It definitely pays dividends, the relationships side of things. And you never know where people are going to be. Obviously people move around, opportunities grow, and you never know who you're going to work with in the future. Make the most of where season for most team sports now is coming to a close, and we're transitioning in season mode. What would be some, I guess, goals and expectations for yourself, and how do you sort of review or when successful preseason?
I think like preseason is something my performance managers, S&C coaches, like, we get excited about this time of year. We try and share that excitement with players. It's our time to have, not that our impact is lessened in season, but to have a really strong impact physically and culturally on a group, especially with the time you get with them. More so if you don't make finals, you get a little bit more time, and you got to get a little bit more clever if you go deep into finals, which we're all chasing. But in terms of that preseason, I think there's lots of talk of planning preseasons and what loads you want to get to, and how many weeks you got and where you're trying to get them. But there's probably less out there around, okay, how are we reviewing preseason? So read Ivan Cleary's biography just before Christmas, and he's obviously got some really cool stories in there. There's the one line that sort of jumped out to me is, like he said, one of the worst feelings as a coach is when you get sort of early to midway through the season and you realise you haven't done enough work in the preseason, which really, highlights the role of the performance department. and it is difficult. So everyone at the moment at our stage of the season in rugby league is feeling pretty good about themselves. You've come through a full preseason. You've banked plenty of work. The trial forms always take it relatively because minutes and who teams play, and but then you start playing for wins and losses, and you get a punch in the face over those first 5 rounds. And rightly or wrongly, that's sort of what your preseason's judged on. So I thought it was pretty cool just to go into how to evaluate a preseason, how you do it formatively across the weeks or months that you have. I just thought it was a topic that was pretty cool to expand upon. So in terms of like general things, like I think most performance departments would target over a preseason is first one to be player confidence. So you want to build player confidence in their physical state. You want them to have high confidence that they're ready for game demands. Secondly, is obviously your progression of all your different capacities without going into loads of detail around running fit, wrestle fit, off the ground fit. You want to run fast. You want to do it often. You want to build numbers, strength and power wise in the gym. You want to build that capacity and progress those capacities, effectively, that when they get to trials, when they get to games, that they're able to cope with competition demands, both positionally and as a team. Another one is obviously training completion. So for players to make all these physical gains, to spend time with coaches, to get better as footballers, from a performance department perspective, you want to keep them on the field. And it can be a challenge, but that challenge across months, weeks, where you're looking for performance gains and you're always pushing the envelope in terms of, I want to go ahead of the game and I want to be ahead of the competition with, oh no, we've got to be resilient here. We've got to keep them on the field. And you have some wins and losses, but that training completion is a big deal. The fourth one is something that's probably I've put a lot of importance on over in probably the last 3 or 4 years, is moving better. Whether that's change of direction, game specific agility, speed wise, posture wise, are they moving better as footballers? Would be another target. And then more sort of broader, holistic wise, are we educating the players? So still at the elite level, are you helping players with their professional habits, recovery, preparation, sleep, nutrition? Are you keeping them accountable? And are you helping or assisting change for those that need it? And probably the last two is every preseason you go into is different. Obviously, your squads at a different stage of their development. You've got some new faces. You've got reviews from last year that you want to target. So there's some specific things that you might take in from the year before, whether it's decisions under fatigue, you want to go deeper into player progressions, or you want to add some more decel progressions. So you want to get the certain group members stronger. There's all these individual things that obviously sit underneath your bigger picture, which you have to focus on as another one. And then last one, the performance department and the support staff. Ultimately, you're there to support the head coach. So we're essentially serving and supporting the head coach. We're supporting the culture that he wants to establish and facilitate at the club. And both myself and the rest of the performance team, we play a huge role in that. So, I know they're pretty general, but yeah, there's probably some key targets going into a preseason which you can, judge your performance team on.
Oh, that's great, mate. It's a great detail and plenty to unpack there. I guess if we move to the player confidence one, which is quite an interesting one, and it might sound obvious to listeners, but I think it's a good one to target going into an in-season, and that will look different to each player on making them sure that they're confident going into games to perform at a really high level regularly and sustain over the long season. What's some of the indicators for yourself where you're, I think we're really nailing that aspect of the program? Is it checking in with players maybe in that January period where you are doing more match play type drills? Talk us through your process to know, we can give that one a tick from a performance point of view.
So in terms of confidence, it's a little bit around engagement as well, where you're working for like 7 weeks into Christmas, 6 weeks afterwards into trials. Um, how much are the players engaged in your program? And that's a whole football staff responsibility because obviously you're working hard, you're building loads, and you're as an S&C or performance manager, you're always asking for more. You're asking for more on the bar, go fast more often, more minutes of intense movement. So you're asking for individuals, and for each, as you mentioned before, each individual is different. Some like lots of information, some like less. But how are you maintaining engagement? So from a week to week perspective, obviously where despite best laid plans for a preseason, you might have a skeleton of I want to build for X amount of weeks and then I want to hold for one and I'm going to go again. Despite this, your playing squad will obviously undergo that ebb and flow of fatigue at different times. So listening to your playing squad, having that relationship with individuals and utilizing your staff around you in terms of balancing fitness and fatigue is really important in maintaining that engagement. The small conversations is one part with athletes. And then it's as a performance manager, for example, how are you maintaining intent? So one example might be you mightn't get in front of the group every meeting once a week. But if you know that you've got a big week coming up and everyone's a bit sore, which you should be in preseason, and it's a go week per se, and you're going to push in terms of loads and intensity, then you're up there saying, this is where we're at, this is what we've done, this is where we want to go to. I need your help. So I need you to go all in on recovery. I need you to go really good on nutrition and sleep this week. I need you to like do your part because this is where we want to take the group and this is our goal at the end. So getting them on board a little bit and trying to make them a little bit more accountable over like this is your development. We're trying to keep you on the field as much as we can. So how are we going to do that? On the flip side, not in front of the group. There's always those sessions where it might be Friday afternoon gym or your second wrestle session of the week where you've got to, as a coach, you've got to bring some energy, and it doesn't have to be fake energy. I think one thing as a coach, you got to be authentic. So you got to be honest in terms of, yeah, I'm not going to get everything right. We make mistakes, but there's got to be a time where you might need to create energy for the group. And that energy for you coming in to help that session or drive that session, might happen like 6 to 10 times across a preseason where you need to really get something out of that group. And it's not a Herculean speech, but there might be some little things that you get to individuals about that boys really need to dig in here. And this is important to us. And I think that they really respect that. And it allows you to sort of, bottom line, have those relationships to keep pushing individuals or keep moving the group forward based on they know you've earned their trust and they know you're trying to get them better.
Yeah, great answer. Love that. With the movement efficiency piece, mate, obviously it's one that's probably all and some maybe doing better than others. Where have you seen the success in programs that have done it really well? Is it targeted, those that are lacking movement piece, whether it be a technical model that the performance program put together? Is that extra windows for individual development, more smaller numbers for the coaches to be able to target those players, or is it more a matter of looking at across the whole week? How can we use warm-ups, gym prep to get the whole group up to speed? Yeah, what's your sort of stance on developing movement efficiency for a group?
Yeah, it might be a loaded response here. So, first of all, you got to build the capacities to do it. So, movement efficiency to me is game specific. I think some of your elite teams within the NRL, they come off reduced preseasons and they're fit. They dominate other teams. I think a lot of the time is because I heard Lachlan Penfold talk about this about pre-Christmas around synchronicity of movement. So it's not that they're loads fitter, they're running ground based, wrestle wise. They move better and their movement as a sort of synchronous unit within their team. They all know their roles and they all know how to move to get to space or do their role at those key parts of the game. And you need to spend substantial time on that. And that's key in terms of involving coaches. So if you look across a preseason, where in those first 3 to 4 weeks from a performance department perspective, you're looking at building both in the gym and in the field the tools and exercises to be able to handle these movement drills, and then you add minutes to them. And then once you get to that post-Christmas phase, which is, I think, is a really key part of evaluating your preseason, is the video analysis with coaches. Once they get to those football, bigger space, bigger field, faster drills where they're able to do things position specifically, then you really get a sense of how much groundwork you've done to build the bottom of that pyramid from a movement perspective, and then what they're able to do once they do hit those sort of bigger space drills. And that's probably the same within most field-based sports. Each position has certain movements that are unique to them, whether it's turning and chasing or getting off a defender to hunt somebody else. These are movements that need high repetition, and they can be taught, and they can be taught through, time on the field. So I think that's where coaching and S&C can really sort of come together, especially with, and the movements in attack and defense may be different as well. So I think the S&Cs that are able to break down movements and then have discussions with coaches is really cool.
Yeah, the programs that have done that well, is that looking like perhaps you got your main group warm up and then they move into some fundamental football drills? Is that the coach, like the strength and conditioning coaches and the tactical coaches, almost queuing a certain drill together from, or is it more one voice is leading it, the coach is leading the defensive agility, for example, and the S&Cs behind the scenes are perhaps helping them with drill selection for a physical?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think the S&Cs look at like the ideal movements to get from A to B, or to turn and chase, or to get your hips in front, or to decel and then go again, and change direction. So they build the ideal, whether it's foot patterns or intensity to start and stop, and the technique or body postures around that. And then from those early few weeks where you feel like you spend enough time, then you start layering in coaching drills, and that's where you can both have a coach and an S&C running those fundamental movement drills, and you make them specific to. There's still movements within rugby league where everyone's up and back, they need to move and shift their hips together to make a tackle, where everyone's doing the same thing. If they get efficient at that, then, and if everyone's efficient at their movements, it naturally makes a team look fitter. They're able to keep up with game speed, and they're able to deal with high fatigue periods of the game more easily. So, it's that integration of coaches and performance staff, and you've sort of got to treat it just like there's catch pass, there's tackle tech, and fundamental movements as a part of that. It should be one of the big rocks in terms of how you're developing a field-based athlete.
Yeah. And the video analysis for coaches that haven't applied this before, is that just simply getting out your phone, or are you setting up a tripod, or is that the drone performance analyst sort of cutting up vision? What's some of your tips?
It's one of the
progress.
It's one of the benefits of obviously working at elite level. Everything's droned and everything's there to be clipped, and it's normally cut up individuals. And from a performance perspective, everyone's got access to those clips, and coaches may see something where there's a missed tackle, or there's a misread, or he just doesn't get his foot to the tackle. We've got an environment where ideally coaches are coming to performance staff around individuals, and then the individual, like the performance staff, as you mentioned before, might be grabbing those individuals after training to do one or two little drills to make sure their feet's under their body and they're moving correctly. And that will continue sort of across the preseason. It's a real sort of team effort, and it promotes really strong relationships between coaches and performance staff, but it can be really meaningful if you get it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And moving back to the engagement piece around player confidence and almost using that as a barometer that the environment's in a good spot from that side of things. When you're perhaps noticing that perhaps engagement isn't in a spot where you'd like it to be from a standard perspective, what are some of your tips for performance coaches or tactical anyone that has influence in any role, I guess, to get that back on track?
I think they're not. There's always going to be sessions where it's tough to go through a full preseason, and every session is like perfect in terms of intensity. When the group's a little bit frayed or a little bit jaded, and there may be sessions in the afternoon, there might be sessions in the next day, and some of it might be a little bit of modification and putting that plan, even though it might have been okay, this was going to be the back half of our highest load week, but they're just not there. So we need to adjust on that, and that's conversations with the head coach and potentially speaking to leaders within the playing group. On the flip side, another couple of methods you could use, which I've done in the past, is if you know you're coming into, say, January into February within the NRL season, and you know that contact goes up, you know our intensity and movement goes up. And it's one of those really sort of periods where you're pushing the limits physically, mentally. Everyone's sort of pushing for positions to get that trial spot. Sitting down with individuals, I think from a performance manager perspective, being able to connect with the individual and go through, okay, gents, what's your specific to you? What are your three things you want to nail through January and February? And that just, again, it opens up lines of conversation and it allows athletes to feel they have some control over or ownership over some of the improvement areas. And it allows little follow-up conversations across a month and not just for myself, but the rest of the performance staff, coaches. And it's pretty cool to see some of the things that come out of it. And they're all competitive beasts. So when they get challenged, they normally attack.
And obviously it's context specific, but generally speaking, how much you trying to empower athletes to draw their own stuff, to educate and sort of handhold a little bit, and maybe develop strategies through facilitating things like recovery, getting them to do extra preparation, pre-training and things like that. Where's the healthy balance, do you think?
It depends, for want of a better answer. Like it obviously depends on your group, where they're at, your leaders within your group, how many young guys you got within a group. Um, Ultimately, like some of the sort of resilience literature, which everyone's trying to create through a preseason, you're trying to create resilience within your group to handle physical loads and footy pressure. Those environments, which is high challenge, high support. So they know you're going to keep challenging them, but they know you're all in to support them with whatever knowledge or whatever role you play within a performance department, that you're there to help them. And you allocate time for individual conversations. If someone wants to work on this, then you might give them 2 or 3 extra things within the gym session just to make them feel like, no, I care for you. I want you to get what you want out of this football season, that I'm going to do some little things that are going to help you feel that. So, I really like that mantra of high challenge, high support.
So, love that answer. And the I guess last one, and then wrap it up with some final pieces that you want to touch on before moving into the last piece, mate. But how objective are you in evaluating a pre-season in transitioning in season? You mentioned the games 1 to 5 is probably a fair reflection on the pre-season, and then it's more about, like you said, we still have got to get to work in season as well, and there's a lot of work that we can do in making impact within season. But that round 1 to 5, is it how the classic things of what maybe fans would look at, how you finish games, obviously availability, probably the common ones of your star players. But are there some other metrics that perhaps that would those that aren't working in the industry might not be aware of that you really hold strong?
Yeah, I think it's obviously goes back to that first point around creating player confidence towards that back end of that preseason, where and there's lots of details out there around like load progressions, a percentage of games you want to hit, weeks that you've built loadings wise that are well above sort of competition weeks. Sharing that information with players, and then making sure as you get closer to footy that you have acute days of training that replicate, whether they're game simulations or arm wrestles, that are replicating the intensity and the feel, with obviously without the win-loss pressure, that you're creating that confidence within individual sessions, and really testing them. And then, yeah, that from an objective perspective, obviously you got all your GPS data. You've got a bank of whether it's conditioning games or arm wrestles or position-specific norms from. There's a range of like NRL game data that's out there readily available now, where you can see, okay, what percentage are we working at, and you want to create players that can, do that percentage or work at that percentage for longer minutes, and you're sharing pieces of that along the way. And then on the flip side of that, as I said before, that they're all really just quantitative measures. That's work done. So how do you determine work quality? That's where that relationship between the performance department and the coaches is huge. And again, I think it's another sort of undersold component of S&C, just that coach performance department relationship. That whether it's coaches or the experts, coaches see things that potentially the performance department don't see. Especially when you get into bigger space and more football specific drills and games. How do they see it flowing? What did they see? Was it the GPS metrics were really strong and physically we're ahead of where we were last year or the year before based on playing the same game? Yeah, they may be, but we didn't match it with footy. So the more you can get footy moving forward in relation to your game model, in relation to how the coaches want to play, and then physical coming with it, that's what everyone's sort of chasing. So by the time you get to the back end of preseason, if coaches are happy with the intensity minutes we've achieved and they're happy with the football content that's been achieved at that physical intensity, then to me, that's probably your key indicator of like overall preseason. So yes, they've done all the training. Yes, they've hit some physical metrics in the gym and on the field, but have you been able to turn those physical metrics into playing the way you want to play? So in that last month of before you hit trials, that's what you're building. So, and then as you mentioned before, around once you do hit footy, then it's looking at some game stats, your GPS stats. GPS stats look like they're more, again, work done. It's more of a monitoring thing. It's not really a performance-based measure. It's coaches and individuals and using the experts you have at the club to get some feedback.
And you mentioned that having a really clear understanding of the head coach's culture and everyone supporting that, both from leaders and the playing group, but obviously performance staff, medical, everyone at the club. What would be an example of the past where you're working with a new head coach and they really stand for something, and how that's influenced your practice or shift your methods, or perhaps you prioritized something a little bit more than you might have done originally if to support the head coach?
Every obviously head coach is slightly different. They're slightly different in terms of, for example, how many numbers they want to look at, what's their threshold for pushing boundaries or pushing through potential high fatigue, where there's a little bit of risk within sessions, and they're happy to take a little bit of risk for that part of the preseason or that part of a training session. In terms of how pretty much hard work and structure. So the processes or what the coach wants to see around the environment, you need to be able to replicate that or reinforce that within a performance department. So on the field, is everyone engaged in sessions? Is everyone ready to help out? And off the field, if something is walked past or it's not done correctly, are the performance staff or myself, are we ready to come in and sort of reaffirm the culture that we want to create within a club? So that could also sort of lead into field sessions in terms of decision making under fatigue, what type of football they want to play, in terms of game model or game plan, um, and building pressure and how teams do that. Utilizing some of the same language, and each club's totally different in terms of they may have. I know the Warriors have got something unique over here in terms of the three sort of values that they share across all components of the football club. And every club's different, but are you as a high performance manager and or high performance department playing your role to reinforce that? So yeah, probably a long way around your question, but on field and off field, yeah, supporting the head coach and the culture that he wants to keep reinforcing is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Is there anything? Obviously, we've unpacked a fair amount there. And I'm mindful of time, mate. It's been 45 minutes of your time late at night. A big day tomorrow. But
living,
yeah. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to, I guess, share on this topic before we start to wrap it up?
Yeah, probably the last thing for preseason is probably a high performance manager's perspective. What are you evaluating within your department? So we've spoke about high support, high challenge, and that should be within your staff as well. The amount of decisions both myself and the rest of the performance team make day to day is an exciting part, but it's a challenging part. And you're never going to get everyone right, and you're always learning and always evolving. Are your relationships strong enough to put your hand up and ask for help, and then put your hand up and say, I made a mistake, and then take on feedback, whether that's informal meetings or in general conversations. Those conversations just need to keep happening. So it's something that I always sort of drive within the performance departments, and that there's got to be high collaboration. You've got to put effort into relationships, effort into both within the performance team and across coaches as well. And it takes time. And it might be the last thing you want to do at the end of a day is, like you said earlier, around rugby league at the end of a week of a preseason, sit down and have a beer before ducking home to family. But those little moments matter. And it's really important within footy clubs to build those connections. So, yeah, you've got your roles, you've got formal reviews that you may do in terms of individuals and giving them full autonomy over their role and making sure that they're confident to do it and they feel like they've nailed their role. But also, yeah, you've got to give them an opportunity to, yeah, own their area, but also have an opinion and ask questions in other parts of the performance team, of the performance team.
Yeah, obviously it's a unique role working in high performance pro sport, and that managerial position. Are there courses that you'd recommend over the years that you've thoroughly thought you've got a lot out of? Obviously, most of the learning I imagine is on the job through experience, but for new high performance manager, head of performance listening in, what would be some courses you found helpful? Or resources,
as you
I
said, a
guess.
lot of it's experiential in terms of who you're working with and different leaders that you work with across both at the high level in terms of head of football, CEOs, head coaches, right through to, as I said, really early in the conversation, I've worked with some elite level S&Cs that obviously have strong leadership traits as well. Background, obviously academia, where I do a lot of reading, whether it's general leadership books. I haven't done any specific leadership courses, probably something that I need to look into in the future. Yeah, even the masters in sports coaching and undertaking a PhD, you get to meet people from all different parts of sport and lots of different stakeholders, and you see things. But in saying that, I've seen some, there's a lot of other sort of leadership and sports leadership courses. They're always coming out, and yeah, potentially down the track. I don't know if my wife will let me, but at some stage we look into some further leadership training.
Fantastic. Well, last three questions, mate. In your work life, what are your pet peeves? Anything that fires you up from an industry perspective?
Yeah, I asked all the performance team that today. They sort of come back to me and you don't like surprises. I'm very planned and detailed. But looking at itself, uh, diff like for me, I do it. I take work home, and it's something I've always battled with. I know it's been spoken about a lot on your podcast from previous practitioners. It's definitely a challenge, and it's something that I have to deliberately think about. You take the challenges of work because work is so absorbing that switching off and going full devotion into how important your family life is a challenge. So yeah, it's probably more getting angry at myself rather than pet peeves with the rest of the performance department.
And favorite way to spend a day off, mate? I imagine there'd be a few and far between, but
Yeah.
when you do get one,
Obviously, with the travel over here in NZ, um, I just want to be at home, like a mix of gardening, coffee, country music, spending time with the wife, and then the beach when possible. With so much travel and whether it's post season or in season, just being around at home with the family is really important.
and obviously recording of middle of February 2025 of this podcast, mate. What's on the horizon? What are you excited about for 2025?
Yeah, I think every year you're excited, like for the time you put into a preseason and your squad and how it evolves and different combinations and playing group, and you might have new staff. Like there's always things to get excited about each year. We're heading to Vegas this week, which will be a cool experience. So I'm keen, as anyone in the performance business is, you're keen to see how your team evolves over a season. So and the challenges that happen with decisions, and it's never sort of a linear progression. There's always ups and downs. So yeah, keen to get amongst it and attack another season.
Awesome. And for those tuning in that might have some follow-up questions, mate, is there a best place to connect?
Not a prolific social media user, showing my age a little bit there, but LinkedIn's probably the one to reach out on.
Fantastic. I'll add LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So for those might be driving the car or wherever you are listening to this podcast, you'll be able to find it there, nice and easy. Well, thanks again, Balin, for your time, mate. I've got a few pages of notes that listeners do as well. Really topic that we haven't probably had such detail on and dived into, and I think it's obviously a fitting one with team sports all around the country and world finishing up their preseason, moving into in-season mode. So appreciate your time and tips and tricks and different experiences you had along the way on this topic. Thanks to everyone that's tuned into the live as well. If you tuned in halfway, make sure to listen to the very start. We didn't muck around. We got straight into some key topics. So you can find that on our YouTube channel before we launch on our podcast in the next few weeks. Our next live chat will be with Danny Lum, who's a real expert and researcher. And he'll be at 2:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 8th of March. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. Thanks again, Balin.
Appreciate the opportunity, Jack. Thanks, mate.